I recently shot a music video for the artist RIKA. Go check it out on her channel. It's called My Fellow Showman. The song itself is about feeling vulnerable and broken and having to put on a brave face as a performer. So with this video, we wanted to play around with ideas of distortion. We also wanted to play around with this idea of vulnerability, being cold and isolated on your own. So that's why we brought in this idea of the rain studio and playing around with visual elements of water and rain and really sort of amplify that vibe. And then also we wanted to get some shots of her alone and isolated within crowds of people. So we shot on streets of London very early in the morning and used sort of crowds outside train stations to help achieve some of these looks. So we shot this video on 2 days, one with sort of full production set up in a studio. We shot mostly on sticks on the RED Komodo using the DZOFilm Vespids. And then on the second day, we shot on location with a much more stripped back setup. So we had the Komodo, but this time I was using mostly the Nightwalker lenses because we were flying the Komodo on the RS2 Pro gimbal, which we had mounted in the sort of ring setup. So we needed it to be as lightweight as possible. One of the things we needed to sort of play around with was the idea of using color, but also maintaining quite a grungy and gritty vibe throughout the video. So in this video, I'm going to go shot by shot. We're going to look over the studio day, all the different lighting setups we used, and then we'll look briefly at shooting on location and the color grade of the video before wrapping up. So in terms of camera settings on the day, we mostly kept the camera at 400 ISO and the color temperature at 5600. These shots were all kind of shot with a very similar variation of similar lighting setups. We've got the cold bore light in the background, and then we've got the Amaran F22C coming down, and then the 600C as the main key. So RIKA was just sat in. We positioned lights around her, and then we just made sort of subtle adjustments, color, intensity, spotlight, to pull off all these different looks without really having to move the camera. These were all meant to be quite abstract, playing around with the idea of like light coming through cracks of the wall. This one we're looking at now was basically all shot with just a 2-light setup. We had the Aperture 600C as the main key light, and that was set to this sort of punchy red. And then we used the Amaran 200X, and then we attached the Amaran Spotlight SE to this. And then this is basically just a gobo effect that we're projecting onto her with that light. So that's set to daylight to interrupt the red on her, and obviously the intensity of that is set higher than the 600C so that it punches through and gives us the white light. This is what the log image looks like, and then this is what it is with the grade. This is set up again, we're using the 600C to light RIKA, softbox on, set I believe to some sort of daylight, and we're using that spotlight attachment to just cut this shape onto her eyes. Obviously we were using a bicolor light here, so we got some red gel from George the Gaffer in order to give us this red color. So we only really had one really punchy color light. We did have some color output though with the F22C, but it's not as punchy or powerful. We wanted to get the inverse of this shot. I don't think we actually use this shot in the final edit. And again, we're just using the simple 2-light setup with the Amaran 200X and the spotlight attachment. In one of the early versions of the edits, we kind of like match cut between these two, but it didn't really work and looked a bit gimmicky. So I think in the final edit, we just stuck with this shot in the end, which again, I really like. And then the final shot we did in this setup, we had the cold bore CL220 as a really powerful, punchy backlight, which I think you can see in frame here. And then we've set it to sort of pulse, which you can see here. So it's pulsing intermittently, and we've hazed it quite heavily as well. So when that backlight kicks in, it lights up all of this haze, and it's almost like we've got a white backdrop behind her. And then projecting these circles on her face is again the spotlight. So if we look here, we can see the behind the scenes shot, just whilst the makeup artist is in doing some touch-ups. You can see the cold bore pulsing in the background, and then if you just look in the frame to the left, you can see the snout of the spotlight just poking through. So the next setup was this blue setup. We had several different shots that we pulled out of this. Basically involved a large PVC screen, and we wanted kind of this effect of RIKA looking out of a window with it raining outside, and the camera was sort of looking in at her as she stares out of this window. So we have this wash of blue light, suggesting a cold moonlight that's coming in, and then a sort of warm side light that comes in. That could be sort of a practical light in the room. Again, it's kind of an abstract setup, but it's sort of suggesting, you know, that she's looking out of a window, quite a somber tone. For this rain effect, we literally were just spraying the PVC sheet with a watering spray can I have at home, and you pump it up. This is kind of roughly what the lighting setup looked like. We've got the F22C above, we've got the Amaran or the Cobalt set to its warmest output to the side here, and then we've got this tiny little aperture MC here, which we used to kind of motivate the light in this shot. To suggest that this big wash of orange light was coming from some little orange source in the background, just to help motivate it a little bit, which of course it wasn't. Originally we were just going to have it wet and static, but as we were spraying it and looking through the camera, we just saw that these drips just looked amazing as they were coming down. This is where I used one of my sort of creative lens filters that I bought before the shoot. I can't remember what it was called, I'll show it up on screen now, but basically it was some prism thing that sort of gives you this ghostly double image, which I really liked. With stuff like this, I much prefer to do it in camera than in post. We had so many shots across the day that we only used it a few times, but again, I really like this. I think these colours that we used on the studio day, they just sort of speak really nicely with the shots we got on the graffiti tunnel, with RIKA's hair. These sort of bright, saturated, vibrant colours was all done sort of purposefully to kind of have a little bit of consistency throughout the video and to sort of match RIKA's brighter pop aesthetic. Without wanting to be too on the nose, we did play around with ideas of broken reflections and mirrors and stuff, but for this we literally just smashed a mirror, as you can see here, Director Lewis giving it a lot of welling.
Oh yeah.
Come on!
So this lighting setup was quite similar in terms of positioning lights to the previous lighting setup with the blue and the PVC window. This time we've still got the warm side light or backlight, but we set the Amaran F22C, which was again above, roughly in a similar position, but we set it to have this sort of purple, pinkish, magenta light. We broke the mirror and it was completely random how it broke. We've got a kind of cleaner section towards the right, or right of the camera shot here. And then when she was speaking certain lines about feeling more broken, she would slightly lean over and move her reflection onto the more distorted and broken side of the mirror, which is really cool. I like that. Also, a few takes of me pulling focus. So this is where we used the Tilta Nucleus Nano 2, and I was basically just pulling focus on this shot between her reflection and then just pulling onto the broken cracks. In the end, we didn't really use that because the shots were only on screen for so little time that we didn't really have time to accommodate focus pulls and stuff, so we left that out of the final edit. This is probably one of my favourite shots in the whole music video. We've wet the floor down, so we've got this nice reflection. Then Director Lewis is just using the same water pump, which has this really fine mist spray to douse her in this water as she performs. There's a little bit of haze in the room, but what's really nice is as he does this, the sort of mist of the rain catches the light, and just as she starts performing, we kind of almost get this warm golden glow around her that just happens at the perfect moment as she started singing, and that's featured at the beginning of the music video, and I just love the sort of serendipity of that. And you can see how we lighting this here. So we had the 600C as the key. I think this was sort of daylight, and then we had the Amaran 200X with a really nice warm backlight. So I had to get the camera down low, so in the end I was just bouncing it and sort of propping it up on the jumper to get the low down shot. I just didn't have time to set a tripod. It's just a really simple 2 light setup, nothing too fancy. We didn't have time for any major complicated lighting setups because we had to move between so many different setups on the day, so again, simplicity was key with this. So if you want to see it, this is the log shot. This was what we were monitoring in camera of the Rec 709, and this is what the final grade ended up. So pushing a lot of blue into the lower end of the image, making sure those blacks really sort of pop, and dialing some of that warmth out from the original as well. This was onto the sort of final bit of the day. We were running really tight for time, so we were all sort of rushing around and feeling the pressure. And this was obviously the most complicated part of the shoot day in the studio. So the rain would run, it was freezing cold, so RIKA, had to stand there for like 3 or 4 minutes in the rain performing to camera. And then there'd have to be a whole sort of reset when the rain stopped. We'd have to sort of clear the water from the ground. Whilst we were changing over and swapping lights, we turned all the lights off and we just accidentally left the backlight on because it was at the back of the room. And we all just loved this contrasty silhouetted backlight. It's like she's outside in the moonlight and you've got this hard edge light. RIKA was just like, yeah, let's do a take like this. So that's exactly what we did. And you can probably see some sort of rough flashing. It's not super prominent. So we also had some Amaran little tube lights, which we put on a strobe effect. They weren't waterproof, so we had to wrap them up in bags, which did cut the output a little bit. I mean, it's a nice sort of subtle effect. I quite like it. But maybe in hindsight, we could have had more powerful tubes. But we just positioned them all around her, some in the back, some in front of her, and just sort of let them go and run, and they're all sort of out of sync. So for this take, again, it's very similar lighting setup. This time we turned on the key lights. We've moved it round so it's on her left, it's on camera right. And then again, I'm using one of the creative screw-on filters here, which kind of gives her this weird aura effect. Performing in the rain, the backlight is really important because it's backlighting the rain. It allows us to see the raindrops like you can see here in the frame. The coloured light is just kind of giving us a bit of interest and some nice contrast. So this is one of the final shots that we got. RIKA's on the ground, the rain's on, and we've got now like a tight close-up. I was wearing a head torch all day, and as we were setting the shot up, it was shining in her face, and it gave this nice shimmering effect. So this is the log image, and you can see it's a lot colder. If we put a Rec 7 and 9 look on, so this is probably what we would have seen in camera on the day. You can see it's really cold. And that's kind of what we were going for on the day. We wanted it to look quite cold and clinical, but when we got it in the grade, we decided we wanted it to just be a little bit more warmer. So we still got quite a grungy cold look, but we've just warmed up that skin tone because we were lighting her with such a cold light. So I just pushed in a bit more warmth and then literally just pumped the white balance, you can see here, to 10,000 to help warm her skin tone up. You can see what it looks like on this grade if I just put it back to daylight. Yeah, crazy. But that's the benefit of shooting in RAW. I think we were shot in MQ for this, so it gave us lots of latitude. But we've pulled the exposure down so much that she's sort of just silhouetted in this shot, which I do like because we see the context of the rain falling in a lot of the other shots, and this looks completely distinct from the other shots now. So a lot of the other shots have a lot of blue, but for this one we just made sure it was quite a stark black because it just allowed her sort of skin tone to pop. I'm going to really quickly run through the second shoot day on location by Waterloo in London. We didn't use the bulk of this day because a lot of the stuff didn't really mix in with the rest of the studio footage. We started very early, hoping for a sunrise, but it was very overcast, which again was the reason why we didn't really use a lot of this footage. We were shooting tracking shots of RIKA performing to camera on the gimbal setup. After we moved from the South Bank, we moved to Waterloo Station. Here we wanted to get performances of RIKA in a crowd. We prepared versions of the song at 30 frames a second and at 40 frames a second, so they play back sped up, and RIKA would perform those sped up. So when we conformed those back to 25 frames a second, everything else around RIKA would appear slightly slowed down, but RIKA would be in real time. Her performance would be in real time. The first shot we didn't really work out. It was getting quite bright by this point, around 9 AM. There's too much level behind her, some nice top-down lighting and backlighting of her, but behind her it's just getting too bright. So luckily we found this little area and the steps leading up to the entrance of Waterloo Station, and there was just little space carved out by the handrail that I could just jump behind. And what was also really nice is that the white stone of the building acted as a natural bounce. So the sun is kind of behind RIKA at this point, shining down. So we get the nice backlighting and then this nice diffuse bounce from this white stone. Next we moved into the graffiti tunnel. We really wanted to film in here because it'd be quite colourful and grungy. We got tracking shots. The lighting in here wasn't great. It was quite dark, so we were shooting at around 800, 1000 ISO, but we still got a really nice clean image. It was mostly, once we pulled the shadows down, it was fine. And luckily there were some overhead lights in the tunnel. The quality of them and the colour of them was pretty grungy. It was quite greeny yellow, so we had to pull that back in the grade a bit. We got a nice pickup shot of RIKA performing to this shard of broken glass. We meant to do this in the studio, but we ran out of time. I also decided to get this shot, which was the Komodo shoulder mounted, shooting back on the Vespids. I was quite conscious that we'd shot a lot on sticks in the studio, and then most of the second day was shot with the gimbal. So I just wanted something with a bit more energy in it. There wasn't a budget for a colorist. We didn't have a lot of time for the grade. There were probably around over 100 shots in the edit, so we had to have something that was pretty flexible and pretty consistent, that allowed us to play with the colors and the saturation, but also provided a slightly grungy look in the grade. The basis of it is just using Resolve's own inbuilt film LUTs. So we're using the Fujifilm 351 3DI D60, and we have a color space transform that converts the red to Cineon log to accept that LUT. So we're using a film print LUT. So that's probably 50% of the look. We've obviously got exposure tweaks, white balance, which we've also dialed in the raw tab. We've added some grain, which has quite a lot of saturation in it. Various shots have varying degrees of the glow effect, especially this one, just to give it a bit more of a ghostly, washed out feel. Some shots have some mid-detail reduction, and then some shots also have skin tone adjustments. It's pretty much conserved across the whole project. We wanted it to have a level of edge and grunge to it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this breakdown was useful. If there's anything I've not covered and you've got any questions, please just drop them down in the comments down below. If you like this video, please just give it a like, drop a comment down below. All these things help with the algorithm. But yeah, thanks for watching. That's it for now. My name's Ed. Until next time, see ya.